Good morning, everyone, and I'm here on behalf of Samso Insights, and today we have a little panel session going, and we have two special guests, not one but two. We have Alex Biggs from Lightning Minerals, and we have the extra special guest of Noel as the Managing Director of
Taiton Resources.
Thank you, Noel. Took a while for you to get there, but we did get there. Look, it's a beautiful day, and we're in the surrounds of the UWA club, and we'd like to thank them for their for making use of their facilities. So much appreciated. Look, guys, I'll start off with the simple questions, and I'll ask you initially, Alex, if you wouldn't mind, just giving us a little bit of an insight as to what's going on with Lightning.
Sure, Tony. Good to be here, Noel. Nice to see you on the other side of the camera.
Yes.
For a change as well.
Very first one, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah.
First one. Okay, so Lightning Minerals, it's a new IPO which will be coming out towards the end of November on the ASX. It's a lithium and critical minerals play focused on the Dundas region of Western Australia. Very hot region down there right now. I mean, you know, down near Norseman, we're seeing a lot of activity with Lovato, Dundas Minerals to the south, obviously Galileo. We've got Liontown there, we've got the Bald Hill project. So our assets, we've acquired them from FMG, the FMG. So that's, you know, that's a bit of a coup in itself. They will be a shareholder in our business moving forwards. Our assets surround the Baldania project, which is Liontown's lithium asset, 15 million tonnes at 1%. So, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of activity down there in the lithium space right now, and you know, we're certainly looking at exposure to that. But it's not just lithium. We see other critical minerals in that region too. You know, copper, nickel, PGEs. So, you know, it's a great opportunity for us. You know, as a new company coming on, low EV of about $2.7 million. Exposure to that critical minerals thematic in one of the hottest districts right now, certainly in Western Australia, and I'd probably suggest the world. So fantastic timing for us, and can't wait to get on the ground and get started.
Yeah, no, thank you, Alex. There's certainly a sense of excitement in Western Australia generally. Particular regions like Dundas are really hitting the right notes, and I think your timing, I would recommend as couldn't be a better time to be launching. The critical minerals space, it's very sexy. Noel, I mean, what as someone that's very much following the current geopolitical trends, what would you say about being in this particular space?
Oh, look, I think the move forward in this no emission world at which everyone seems to be moving forward to, it's really just going to be a matter of when rather than an if. So, I mean, the critical mineral space, the essential mineral space, I think that's the key, right? And there's not enough out there, as we know. I mean, there's lots of talk about it already. And look, you know, where Alex is talking about, Dundas just had a big announcement. So we do know that there's mineralisation there. So that's the space that people should be looking at.
Yeah, well said, Noel. Coming to your company, do you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, look, Taiton Resources, like Alex, we're in the throes of raising funds. Our IPO is a minimum of 7 million raised to a maximum of 10. The 7 million is underwritten, so we got really to find ourselves some shareholder spread and any sort of new investors to come in for that. And our projects are in South Australia and Western Australia. Focus is on, obviously, in South Australia on the highway project. It's sort of targeting probably a porphyry IOCG style. The whole concept is that, you know, we sit sort of smack in the middle between Guyla, Creighton proper and the IOCG belt, as people would call them, right? So historical drilling been there, a bit of work, but historically misunderstood as a place where there's not much happening. And I think that there's a lot of the understanding of the tectonic setting there that was sort of in question, and the things that we've put together sort of lining up and sort of commenting that we're more like the IOCG belt. But again, that means, you know, maybe the Guyla has an interlayer of both that. And, you know, so that's where we're at the moment.
Noel, I know that, and obviously I'm a non-geo, and a lot of our viewers won't be geologists, but my understanding is that you're hoping that the ground will somewhat emulate the Olympic Dam stuff. Now, can you just tell us a bit more about that side of things?
Yeah, look, I guess the critical part of what we've done going into the IPO and is that we did some age dating, and the age dating was really trying to say, look, this part of the world is actually the same age group as that part of the world, being the Olympic Dam, Carrapateena, Prominent Hill. You know, we call them the IOCG belt. So there's age dating came in at 1658, and which pretty much puts us there. You could say that it could be plus or minus. Yep, fair enough, but at least it's not what they thought of, which was 130 million years more. So we're really promoting that. And one of the important parts where we are is that there's shallow cover. So the cover is actually somewhere to a maximum 50 meters deep. So if anyone's sort of looked at this kind of space before, 50 meters is very, very shallow compared to hundreds of meters of cover, which they are used to. So that is basically our messaging that we want to get out there, is that, hey, we've got a space that potentially is a blank canvas for us to write our own story, but, you know, it's still exploration, right?
Yes. Look, I found it fascinating that you and your team were able to work out that's the sort of prospectivity that you had in mind and gave you a fresh ground to cover. For the uninitiated, we don't take for granted that everybody knows the story about Olympic Dam, but it is one of the largest, well, it's probably the largest uranium reserve, and I think it's the fourth largest copper. So it's massive, and to be on that track to try and find another whale, so to speak, it must be pretty exciting. But you haven't put all your eggs in one basket, and we've got a couple of projects. What about the gold prospect?
Yeah, look, the gold prospect is Challenger West, which is west of Challenger Gold Mine, and also our Lake Barley project in Western Australia, which is a sort of a salt lake kind of project, looking for a greenstone belt that's sort of gone underneath the lake. We've done some sort of closer space drone magnetics, and we've got a couple of walk-up drill targets from that. So, look, you know, it's a bit like, you know, as I always try and tell people, exploration, it's a marathon. It's about having that faith to go after it. Yeah. You know, when we talk about Alex's projects, you know, I mean, it's a swag. It's right in the province where things happen. People haven't been there, and the lithium space, let's face it, is 2 years old, right? There's so much potential out there, you know, and the fact that we are finding them as we go. Bear in mind, you know, when this whole thing started, Mount Holland was a gold mine, and then they got a phone call, hey, you know,
well, we saw it with Mount Ida with red dirt, of course. You know, it was a gold mine first, and obviously now it's shaping up as a fantastic lithium prospect. And you know, you look at that Dundas region; it's proven, you know, in the base metal space and gold as well to some degree. But you know, you're right; it's only the last couple of years that we see it as an emerging lithium province, and obviously everything else province, PGEs, copper, nickel. So. It's exciting, and I think it goes to show that there's still areas in Western Australia which are accessible. Norseman is obviously 2 hours from Kalgoorlie, we understand that, where there's still plenty of exploration opportunity. And like you said, Tony, to have a project in Western Australia, I think it's the premier mining jurisdiction. I mean, obviously WA and Ontario in Canada, obviously I have experience there when I was Managing Director at Critical Resources, a great place to do business too.
Absolutely.
So, you know, WA is, you know, market leading in that regard.
Look, well said, and sort of to underpin that, the Fraser Institute recently released their revised rankings, and WA was indeed ranked #1 mining region in the world.
Fantastic.
In the world, which is fantastic. Just going back to old world metals, the gold prospectivity that you have as well, is that a potential? Do you see it as a potential fast track to cash flow?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, there is gold potential there. We do have leases which historically, we see gold mineralisation in those regions. But I think, I don't think there's a fast track to cash flow in any of these commodities. That still means you've got to build a project. And, as I've said, people would have heard me say it before when I was, managing director at Critical Resources. You do your work on your projects like you're going to build them. Okay, so for us, we love that lithium potential, the proximity to Liontown's project, and of course Lovato, who is directly to the south of us, and Liontown directly to the north. We're in the middle of those two. When we see that, geologically, lithologically, we see a clear trend there. We've got clear targets. So I think for us, it's about news flow. It's about doing work. People have seen me do that before. I'm very aggressive in the exploration, the way we run our businesses. Your news flow has to be relevant. It has to relate to your narrative, but then your narrative has to relate back to your news flow. And having neighbours in that region who are being so successful right now, even you go back 2 months and you say Dundas, people would look at it and go, okay, yeah, well, where's that? Now you say it, people understand. Galileo particularly really has had a fantastic year down there. So, look, I think that there's no fast track to cash flow. I think it's about building sustainable resources in every sense of the word. I think you do the work, you have a clear strategy. I guess on our board we've got some very good technical expertise. Peter McNeil, who's our chairman, very experienced geologist. Karen Lloyd as well, very experienced geologist. So having that oversight there, my background of course is mining engineering. So that's great, and I think we can really drive that story hard.
Thank you, Alex. It actually brings me nicely to a question I was going to put about your board. I'd have a look at the profiles there. Very interesting, very in-depth, strong experience. I made particular note of a Dr. Karen Lloyd, and she's listed as a geologist and mineral economist and mining engineer.
Correct.
Do you want to sort of talk a little bit about her?
Yeah, so Karen was, very crucial in the acquisition of the assets from FMG, and initially Karen was a geologist, and then did the other stuff there as well. Her PhD is in mining engineering, so she's an alumni of mine at the Western Australian School of Mines. Having that level of experience is fantastic at a board level. The strategy is set by the board, of course, and we do that work, and we move forward from there. But to have people that have that insight and expertise, that's invaluable. Well,
I must say it's impressive. I think both IPOs have got in-depth boards. Much experience, and the breadth is very good too.
And having been on boards before where you don't have that, it does make it more difficult. So that's a real sort of silent weapon for us. I see.
Looking at,
sorry,
Noel,
to interrupt, but just to add what Alex was saying before about the prospectivity, I think a lot of people think of exploration companies going at IPO on previous projects, gold, copper, everything. It's very sort of well walked track. Whereas what he's talking about, lithium is really only, as we said, last 2 years, but the understanding where the pegmatites are and the LCT type pegmatites are just being learned now. So where you have like the likes of Liontown and all this, we're just learning, hey, maybe it's actually further away, or similar things coming up. Like you have the Mount Holland, Mount Ida type, then you got the Pilbara stuff. So there's things being learned, So just because they've got a sort of greenfield project doesn't actually mean, because we actually don't know what's there. Similar to the discovery of Tropicana when it happened, and Nova Bollinger and Winoos and the Havrons, they didn't have sure signs of discovery, right? So I think that's where the technology where we have now today brings to the fore what the potential, right? When we look at our project, people walked through there, drilled holes and walked off, but then suddenly when you re-looked at it in depth, there's actually more stuff there than what they thought, right? That doesn't mean that it's not productive or not prospective. I like this, where they are, and when looking at what they have, it's new territory. No one's actually looked for those things before, right?
And very encouraging. And with the number of explorers out there now, it's essentially there's a database that's being built up, and it is very it's got a lot of potential, and there's a lot of good results, and that's gradually filling in the knowledge gap, and you're each building on the other to some extent. I find that's a good thing, so that where we've got almost WA as an epicentre for critical minerals, it's just creating a bigger.
We're just learning about it. I mean, WA now is touting to be the place to look for these kind of pegmatites, and if you look at Alex's experience when you're talking about the board, and look at where critical minerals is now, he's delivered on those things that he said previously, right? So that's where people need to see the board and the content on what they are, where they've done. We've got Mark Strikes with Taiton, so there's that depth and experience to get there. We've got Chris Lloyd on the board, where he's an entrepreneur and looking at maybe even bringing sort of offset things into the company to, create sort of cash flow in the future. That's it's like selling one product, but the other product may not be related, but it brings the cash flow, which is like a business, right?
Well, just thinking longer term and talking a bit more about the business models, I would think that you would be relatively buoyed by recent developments in downstream processing. Did you want to sort of comment on that, perhaps, guys?
Yeah, look, I think vertical integration. I think it's very important. Now what that means, to what extent, we need to see. But if we reference Canada, you can see a lot of the North American manufacturers moving into Canada and building facilities there, for downstream, be it vehicles, be it component parts of vehicles, okay? I mean, I think having the Kwinana lithium refinery here in Perth is fantastic, and that's sort of gone a little bit under the radar, but knowing some people that were involved in that, I understood the government was very supportive, and I guess it's important the government steps in and now needs to fill that gap. Downstream is what it's about, and I think if we can look at that, particularly in terms of the geopolitical situations we see and supply chain problems and future issues, if we can do that here in Western Australia and Australia as a whole, and then start leading towards manufacturing. And I'm not talking about building whole cars or whatever, I'm talking about maybe building component parts first. I think that's a great opportunity. I think it needs to be supported by the government. I think anything that's policy driven change will accelerate that. We've seen that before in China. We're seeing that in America to some degree. They're going through this second manufacturing boom. Why can't we do it in Australia?
Alex, that's a very, very pertinent question. And if you look at the Australian economy, and I've commented on this before, it's regarded as a very, very simple economy. In terms of complexity, it's ranked about 70th out of about 200 countries. Now, that's pretty appalling for a developed nation. If you go back to the 1950s and 1960s, and the key word there was manufacturing, we had 25% of the workforce was in manufacturing. Now it's dropped to barely 10%, in fact below. So,
is it due to cost? Is it due to power costs, labour costs?
It was to do with those things, and it also refers back to a time where there was quite a lot of industrial disputation. It took us a while to work our way through the IR system, but costs and then gradually globalisation saw us exit manufacturing. And one of the sort of the keynote industries that we exited from was producing motor vehicles. But governments had said, we're moving out, we are tired of subsidising that industry, it's not going to be efficient. But in reality, looking at the automotive industry, they'd failed to read the tea leaves and change the models that they were producing. And if they'd gotten that right, they might still be doing it. But coming back to mining, now the federal government the current Labor federal government has ticked off on the previous government's manufacturing grant scheme. That's not the formal name. So there's recognition by both by the main parties of the need to do more on manufacturing and to use our mining industry as the catalyst for that, which hence we're talking about downstream processing. just to let the audience know that the federal government has signed off on, I think it was $140 million has gone to a company that is looking at doing mostly batteries or precursor batteries based somewhere in Kalgoorlie. And I know there's an MOU with the likes of Poseidon, for example, to bring in the nickel for that purpose. So we are seeing encouraging signs, and you've mentioned the facility at Kwinana, which with regards to lithium is really, really, really important. But again, I think it is an exciting time, but if you were talking to the politicians, I'm guessing you both say there needs to be more done. And thinking about that and giving you a moment to sort of collect your thoughts, if you had an opportunity to be talking directly with the Prime Minister, what message would you be saying about that? Maybe you go first, Alex.
I think there's a big disconnect in understanding what the mining industry represents in Australia now. Are we a minerals dependent economy? Question mark. As a whole, Australia probably not. As Western Australia, probably yes. Okay. Now we see a lot of, I guess there's always a lot of discussions about that, you know, particularly in the East, and you know they get money from royalties which are generally come, you know, principally from WA, right? And there's that discussion in the West about the money going that way. Okay, that needs to stop for a start. I think understanding the process of mining, like exploration, like we're talking about, taking a project into production, taking it through, you know, producing sustainably, producing a product, and not just shipping it offshore, has to be understood.
Adding value.
That's right. So until, and this isn't a knock on any, you know, government or political party, this is just a general comment. I'm just saying that until every part of that chain is understood and what the value proposition is today, what it can be, and what we need to do to make it meet this end product, which is manufacturing, I think we agree with that, the discussion is completely moot. And until we sit down and do that, and you know, governments perhaps consult professionals within the industry who can support that knowledge and help people learn, support manufacturers. I mean, look at Elon Musk, you know, he talks about manufacturing, the way he talks about it and the way he's just gone and done it. Is it perfect? No. But you know what?
He's got the job done.
He got the job done, he produced a product. So I think that's where we need to get to. There needs to be that education piece. We need to understand the whole chain, because it's not, you know, just in the mining side alone, it's extraordinarily complicated to bring a mine into production. Governments need to support that. You know, the logistics, the transport alone, extremely complicated. You know, you need a good road network, rail network. You know, ever since I've lived in Australia, which is 20 years now nearly, there's been talk about a fast rail line between Melbourne and Sydney. And it's still just talk. And it probably was going 10 years before that or 20 years before that. We need that action, and I think the only way you do that is understanding what the outcome is. And I think that's jobs, you know, that's supporting our economy, and then working backwards from there and looking at every step and every link in that chain and understanding it in detail. That's the disconnect. That's why it doesn't happen.
Yeah, well said, Alex. I mean, we need to diversify our economy, and we've been talking about that for 30 years, and we have not progressed. In fact, you'd arguably say it's gotten simpler, not more complex, which we want. That gives you strength, and you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, and just creates a better social background to everything as well. Noel, did you want to comment, as I say, if we had the Prime Minister in front of us, what sort of message would you be putting to him to support mining industry and morphing into manufacturing?
Look, I think Australia now is at a point where it's in a unique position where we have a disconnect in the globalization process, thanks to COVID and a few geopolitical issues that's happening. So we, you know, it's if ever there was a time for us to take advantage of nationalising or being a bit more what Alex was alluding to, is that supporting the mine industry is now, right? Where you can say, look, take the rare earth sector, for example. In 2011, China made a little comment like, I'm not going to sell anymore. Now, I just looked at the, I think it was a 25-year price chart. It just went through the roof, right? And then the next year the price just dropped and it's flat. Projection to 2030 or something. Fairly flat, but it's still high-ish, right? Now, that tells you the power of what that statement could be. And now we're seeing more people talking about rare earths, only because of what's been happening. Now, this is a time where the government should step in and say, look, let's support this. I mean, lithium industry, we've just discussed, it's WS touting as the place, best place to look for it, etc., etc. We've got the iron ore and oil and gas and things like that. But this is probably the time where they could step in and get the most bang for their buck. You could argue maybe 4 years ago or more, the bang for your buck wasn't as high, but now it's really, I mean, you got the lithium refinery down in Kwinana, that's step one. And then, but what could you do for the rest, right? So, I mean, in projects, and that effect will drive the exploration, the resource industry to no end, right? Because suddenly there's like a big light at the end of the tunnel. So those projects, like people say, oh, it's grassroots. But that's actually, if you find something, the value, the return, it's so much bigger than before, right? We're not needing to put it on a ship and ship it half the world. But it's in our backyard, and the value add from that is another measure that we never seen, right? So I think that message is very consistent with what Alex is saying. It's just that, but I see it's that probably this is the best time if ever you want to capture this. This is the time, right? While everyone's like running around, we got the resource. We're the land of milk and honey and things like that. We should be taking more advantage of it now, right?
Look, if I was looking down the barrel talking to the Prime Minister, I would say to listen to what our two guests have just talked about, and I would say to you, Mr. Albanese, now is the optimal time to focus on working with the mining industry with a view to diversifying into the manufacturing side in order to create a better, bigger and a wealthier outlook for Australia as a whole, with a concerted effort and working in concert with the state governments. You, Mr. Albanese, can make that pathway easier and quicker for the betterment of our society. That's what I'd be saying to you. Just coming back to something a little bit more prosaic, because there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of exploration. There's lots of things happening, but we're finding, excuse me, that the very practical issue of staffing and people resources is quite problematic. Did you want to make a comment, say, on that, Alex?
Yeah, look, I think this is one of those links in that chain that we're talking about. This is really, really crucial, right? I mean, manufacturing doesn't happen without mining, okay? And mining doesn't happen without people, at all levels, okay? So, yes, it is hard. I mean, if you look at the number of graduates coming out of universities in technical disciplines in mining, it's certainly not as high as it was. I'm involved in the Western Australian School of Mines, which is my school, and the alumni there, and it's always a challenge to get people to see the opportunities in mining, because people see it as like a box. Okay, you're just going to go to this place in the middle of nowhere for 2 weeks and get hot and dirty and probably make a bit of money, but that's not.
But they will get hot and dirty, Alex.
They will. That's not as entertaining.
Well, they could go cold and dirty in Canada, of course.
Exactly, of course, right? But look, the thing is this. I think we have to understand the relevance of the mining industry again. So if people see the relevance of mining, so now we're looking at critical minerals and things like lithium. You can see the relevance of that. Okay, it leads into technology, it leads into tech. Downstream. There's other opportunities within the industry. I think that's what has to be driven, and that's where we're going anyway. As we get into a sort of, I guess, more technological world, it keeps evolving. But how we attract people to the industry now, today, to do that on the groundwork is still very difficult, right? And you'd probably be seeing the same.
No, what?
Look, I think that everything is all the above. What Alex said, but I think that the key is that, you need the people, we need them trained up. There's what caught us out in the early part was that we had a downturn in the economy. Well, from our point of view, that geologists decide not to be geologists, and people who went to university decide to do other careers. Then you got this gap. Then it takes you time to catch up. Then you have that gap of experience and non-experience, right? So, and from our point of view, I think that's really, really important. And I think, in any industry, I guess, it's the people that counts. And with technology coming, that helps out a bit, to close that gap in the understanding. But yeah, I mean, look, without people, then nothing gets done, right?
Well, we have to make the industry more inclusive to everybody, and it certainly has changed. I mean, from when you were starting in the industry, and even me, I mean, it has changed, and it is changing, and it can always be better, and we should strive towards that. But it is a great industry to be involved in. I mean, for me, falling into the mining industry was fairly fortuitous, and it was lucky, right? And I'll take that. But it's been very good to me, and I've loved it, and it's a great business, and it's very exciting, very interesting, and I believe there's a greater good from it as well, in the stuff we're talking about, right? It helps build an economy, it helps build wealth for everybody.
Look, again, I endorse what you've said, Alex. You're in a business, but there's more to it than just business. And if you're picking the sort of minerals to be investigating, you've gone to the right areas and the right minerals. It's extremely exciting. If you wanted to sort of sum up your particular venture, Noel, and I'll ask you first, how would you encapsulate the vision for your business, your company?
Look, I guess the takeaway that would be fantastic is that we're potentially looking at finding something of a size in an area that not everyone had mistaken, right? From a geologist's point of view, especially from an exploration geologist's point of view, it's like the venture that people didn't find, they didn't know, you found it. It's a satisfaction, right? And I think it comes back down to the things we do. The passion is about that rather than making lots of dollar signs. It's getting that done, that completion, and we're all here for a short time, and when we walk away, it's nice to look back and say, oh, I was part of that, and a lot of that comes from when I first started uni. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be involved in the discovery of the Bronzewing gold mine and then the Merlin diamond field.
Yes.
So that sort of spurred me saying, hey, I want to be involved in something that I could put a name on or a stamp on with the team, because it's always about the team, right? It's never about yourself. So that's probably what I would sum up my thoughts.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you very much. Alex, a similar question to you.
Yeah, sure. Look, from a company perspective, we see this as a great opportunity. It's the right thematic, critical minerals, lithium. We're in a great region, red hot right now, Dundas. Okay, so being there is fantastic. Clean co, new start. It's great to be able to build your register the way you want it. Having not to manage a sort of difficult register is that's an honour, right? And the interest we've had in the business is fantastic, and it's phenomenal. So and I think the opportunity to get on the ground there, start doing work early, and really start building a story, and support our neighbours in the region too. I think that's important. I always like a bit of cross promotion to everybody there. I think it works for all of us, right? But principally, we need to build something that's sustainable as a business. And there's ways to do that and ways not to do that, right? So for us, it's about clear strategy, good narrative, work that backs that narrative, and you just keep pushing forward and you keep moving forward. But coming from an enterprise value of $2.7 million as a starter, we really like it.
Thank you, and once again, thanks to Mr. Noel Long and Mr. Alex Biggs. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.